Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into UK VAT?
I'm ready.
Perfect. Whether you're running a business, thinking of starting one, or just curious about this whole tax thing, this one's for you. We've got this great blog post from MA and CO accountants. It breaks down some really important stuff about the recent VAT changes.
Absolutely.
So, first things first, what is this VAT threshold everyone keeps talking about?
Well, the VAT threshold is basically the amount of taxable turnover a business can have
Okay.
before it's legally required to register for VAT.
Hmm,
Think of it as a line in the sand. Once you cross it, you've got some new responsibilities.
got it. So let's get specific. What's the magic number in the UK right now?
As of April 1st this year, the VAT registration threshold is £90,000. So that means if your total value of everything you sell that's subject to VAT exceeds that amount,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to register with HMRC.
£90,000, huh? That's pretty significant. What exactly does taxable turnover mean, though? Is that just all the money a business brings in?
Good question. It's not quite that simple. Taxable turnover refers to the value of the goods and services you sell that are actually subject to VAT.
Okay,
So some things like certain food items or medical supplies are exempt from VAT,
right.
so they wouldn't be included in that calculation.
Ah, okay. So it's not just a blanket rule. There are
Right.
exceptions. This is getting interesting. Now, let's say you're a business owner and you're getting close to that £90,000 threshold.
Uh-huh.
What should you be doing?
Well, you definitely don't want to get caught off guard. So
Right.
it's crucial to keep a close eye on your turnover. Knowing where you stand is the first step.
Right. Makes sense. But what happens if you do end up crossing that threshold? Is it game over? Are you stuck with VAT forever?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There's also something called a deregistration threshold,
Okay.
which is currently set at £88,000.
Hmm.
So if your taxable turnover drops back down below that, you can actually deregister from VAT.
So there's a bit of wiggle room then. It's not a one-way street. You
Okay.
can potentially come back out.
Exactly. But it's definitely something you want to be aware of and plan for. Understanding these thresholds can help you make strategic decisions about things like
Right.
pricing or expanding your business.
Let's talk about strategy for a second. The blog post mentioned something I found pretty surprising. Businesses can choose to register for VAT even if they're below the threshold.
Yeah.
Why would anyone voluntarily sign up for more paperwork and taxes?
It might seem a little bit counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but there can be some real benefits
Uh-huh.
to voluntary registration. One of the biggest is the ability to reclaim VAT on your business expenses.
Okay, so if you're spending a lot on supplies, equipment, services, you could actually get some of that VAT back from HMRC. It's like a little bonus,
Yeah,
right?
it can be,
Yeah,
especially for businesses with high input costs.
right.
And sometimes being VAT registered can actually make your business look more professional
Hmm.
in the eyes of potential clients, especially larger companies.
The good old perception game. I get it. But of course, there are two sides to every coin. What are the potential downsides of voluntarily registering for VAT?
Well, the main drawback is that you'll then need to charge VAT on all of your sales,
Okay.
which could make your prices higher and potentially less competitive.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, it does mean more paperwork and administrative burden. VAT accounting isn't exactly known for being simple.
Yeah, I can imagine that can be a real headache for small business owners who are already juggling a million things.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So it's not a decision to be made lightly. You really need to weigh the pros and cons carefully.
Right.
And the best way to do that is to talk to a qualified accountant. They can help you figure out the best approach for your specific business situation.
Solid advice. Now let's get to something that sounds like it could potentially simplify this whole VAT ordeal for some businesses. The flat rate scheme. Tell me this is as good as it sounds.
For certain businesses, the flat rate scheme can be a real game changer.
Okay.
It takes some of the complexity out of VAT accounting.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me. How does this scheme actually work in practice?
Instead of meticulously tracking VAT on every single transaction,
Right.
the businesses on the flat rate scheme pay a fixed percentage of their total VAT inclusive turnover to HMRC.
So it's kind of like a shortcut, a simplified way of calculating your VA liability.
Yes,
But I'm guessing there are some catches who's actually eligible for this scheme.
you're right, there are some criteria. To qualify, your VA exclusive turnover needs to be £150,000 or less.
Okay.
So it is specifically designed for smaller businesses.
Got it. So not for the big corporations out there. Now, I'm a show me, don't tell me kind of person. Let's say I have a small business with the V8 inclusive turnover of £100,000 and my flat rate is 10%. How much V8 would I actually owe under this scheme?
In that scenario, you would simply multiply your V8 inclusive turnover of £100,000 by your 10% flat rate.
Okay.
So you'd owe HMRC £10,000 in V8.
Okay, that does sound a lot simpler than tracking every single transaction. But how do you know what your flat rate is? Is it the same for everyone?
No, the flat rate actually varies depending on the type of business you run.
Right.
HMRC has a list of different business categories and their corresponding flat rates.
Okay.
For example, IT consultancies have a different flat rate than retailers.
Makes sense. It's tailored to different industries.
Yeah.
So where does someone find this magical list of flat rates? Is it hidden in some secret HMRC vault?
Not quite a secret vault.
Okay.
You can find all the information about flat rates and eligibility criteria on the HMRC website. It's publicly available.
Well, that's good to know. So it sounds like the flat rate scheme could be a lifesaver for some small businesses.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily the right fit for everyone.
Right.
How do you know if it's actually the best option for your business? What are the key things to consider?
That's the million-dollar question. You need to carefully weigh the pros and cons of the flat rate scheme versus standard VAT accounting.
Okay, let's break it down. What are the key differences? When would one be a better choice than the other?
The flat rate scheme, as we've discussed, is generally simpler and less admin-heavy, making it a good option for businesses with relatively low expenses that aren't claiming much VA back.
So, for example, if your main expenses are things like software subscriptions,
Yeah,
you're probably not going to be reclaiming a ton of VAT anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
But for businesses with high input costs, maybe they're buying a lot of stock or raw materials, standard VAT accounting might be the better route because it allows you to reclaim VAT on those purchases.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
You really need to analyze your own business and see what makes the most sense financially.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like it could even change over time as your business grows and evolves, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The key is to stay informed and be willing to adapt your approach as needed. Speaking of staying informed,
Yes.
let's talk about some of the recent changes and updates to VAT in the UK. We've already mentioned the new thresholds, but are there any other developments businesses need to be aware of?
Yeah, this is where things can get a bit tricky, right? VAT seems like it's constantly changing, and it's hard to keep up with all the latest rules and regulations. What are the biggest things businesses need to watch out for?
Well, one of the most important things is to stay up to date with HMRC guidelines. They're constantly being updated,
Right.
so relying on old information can lead to costly mistakes.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You've
Mhm.
really got to stay on top of it. What's the best way to do that? Is it just a matter of checking the HMRC website every day?
Checking the website regularly is definitely a good start,
Yeah.
but also don't be afraid to reach out to a professional accountant for guidance.
Hmm.
They can help you navigate all the complexities and ensure you're staying compliant.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like having a VAT expert in your corner. Now let's shift gears for a minute and talk about those common VAT pitfalls.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some classic mistakes businesses make when it comes to VAT.
Uh-huh.
What are the big ones we should be watching out for?
There are definitely a few common traps.
Okay.
The first one is failing to register for VAT on time once you exceed that £90,000 threshold.
Ouch. I bet HMRC doesn't take kindly to that.
No.
What are the consequences of being late to the VAT party?
It can be pretty hefty. Fines, penalties, even back taxes. So definitely not something you want to risk. Another common mistake is not knowing the correct flat rate for your specific industry.
Right. We talked about how important it is to find that specific rate for your type of business.
Uh,
No point paying more than you have to. What else should businesses be mindful of?
Calculation errors are another common pitfall,
Okay.
especially when it comes to the flat rate scheme. Remember, you're using your VAT inclusive turnover for those calculations, not your VAT exclusive turnover.
Got it. Precision is key here. Any other big no-nos to watch out for?
One last thing I'll mention is knowing when to deregister if your turnover drops below the threshold. You don't want to be stuck dealing with all the VAT admin if you no longer have to.
Makes sense. It's like anything else in business, efficiency and knowing the rules of the game can save you a lot of headaches down the line.
Exactly. VAT can seem intimidating, but with a bit of knowledge and careful planning, it doesn't have to be a burden.
Well, I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground already, from V8 thresholds and the flat rate scheme to those common mistakes to avoid. We'll be back after a short break to dive even deeper into the world of UK V8.
One thing we haven't touched on yet is how these VA thresholds can impact businesses psychologically.
Oh, interesting. You mean like how business owners feel about hitting that threshold?
Exactly. Imagine you're a business owner and you're just shy of that VAT registration threshold. You might be hesitant to take on new clients or expand your operations because you don't want to cross that line and deal with all the VA complexities.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's like this psychological barrier holding businesses back from growth.
It can be, especially for small businesses that are already stretched thin. They might see VAT registration as this huge hurdle, even if it ultimately benefits their business in the long run.
So how can business owners overcome that fear?
I think education is key.
Yeah.
The more they understand about VIT, the less daunting it will seem. And that's why I think resources like the blog post we're discussing today are so valuable. They break things down in a way that's easy to understand and digest.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to something as complex as VAT.
Okay, let's zoom out for a minute and talk about the bigger picture. How do you think these recent changes to the VIT thresholds might impact the overall entrepreneurial landscape in the UK?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say for certain, but I think it could have some interesting effects. On the one hand, you could argue that the higher threshold might encourage more people to start businesses, knowing they have a bit more breathing room before having to deal with VAT.
Right. It lowers the barrier to entry for aspiring entrepreneurs.
They can test the waters and get their business off the ground without having to worry about VAT right away.
Exactly. But on the other hand, it could also create a bit of a cliff edge effect, where businesses that are just below the threshold might be reluctant to grow for fear of triggering that VAT registration requirement.
So it's like a double-edged sword. It could boost entrepreneurship, but it could also stifle growth for some businesses. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Definitely. And of course, we can't forget about the impact these changes might have on competition. Will smaller businesses be able to compete effectively with larger VAT-registered businesses that can reclaim input VAT?
That's a great point. It adds another layer of complexity to the whole equation. Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that has the potential to revolutionize the way we approach VAT. Technology.
Yes, the tech revolution is coming to VA accounting.
Exactly. How do you see technology shaping the future of V8? What kind of innovations are we talking about?
We're already seeing a lot of exciting developments in this space. There are software platforms that are designed to automate VAT calculations, streamline the reporting process, and even flag potential errors or issues before they become problems.
That sounds amazing. It's like having a virtual VAT assistant working for you 24/7.
It's getting pretty close to that.
Wow.
And as these technologies become more sophisticated and accessible, they have the potential to really level the playing field, making it easier for businesses of all sizes to stay compliant with VAT regulations.
So it's not just about making life easier for business owners, it's about promoting fairness and transparency across the board.
Precisely. And I think we'll continue to see even more innovative solutions emerge in the coming years, powered by things like artificial intelligence and machine learning.
AI for VAT. Now, that's something I never thought I'd hear.
I know.
But it makes sense, right? If AI can analyze massive amounts of data and identify patterns, it could be a game changer for VAT accounting.
Absolutely. Imagine a system that can predict potential VAT issues before they even arise, allowing businesses to proactively address them and avoid costly mistakes.
That would be incredible. It would take so much stress and uncertainty out of the equation.
Exactly. And I think that's ultimately the goal of these technological advancements, to make VAT less of a burden and more of a seamless part of doing business.
Okay, let's bring it back to the human element for a second. We've talked a lot about technology, but what about the role of accountants? Will robots eventually replace them?
That's a question I get asked a lot, and my answer is always the same. Technology will certainly change the role of accountants,
Okay.
but it won't make them obsolete.
So it's more of an evolution than a revolution.
Exactly. Instead of spending their time on tedious manual tasks, accountants will be able to focus on higher value activities like providing strategic advice, analyzing complex VAT scenarios, and helping businesses optimize their overall tax position.
So it's like technology is freeing up accountants to do what they do best. Think critically solve problems and provide valuable insights.
Precisely. They'll become more like trusted advisors, guiding businesses through the ever-changing landscape of VAT and helping them make informed decisions.
That's a much more reassuring picture than robots taking over the accounting world.
Agreed. And I think it highlights the importance of adaptability. Accountants who embrace technology and continuously learn and evolve will be the ones who thrive in the future.
That's a great message for anyone in the accounting profession, or really any profession for that matter.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychological impact of V8 thresholds, the potential influence on the entrepreneurial landscape, and the exciting role of technology in shaping the future of V8 accounting. What other aspects of this topic haven't we covered yet that you think are important for our listeners to understand?
One thing we haven't really delved into is the importance of understanding VAT from an international perspective.
Oh, that's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the specifics of UK V8, but businesses that operate globally need to be aware of the V8 rules in other countries as well.
Absolutely. And those rules can vary significantly from country to country. What's considered taxable in one country might be exempt in another, and the rates themselves can fluctuate wildly.
So businesses that are involved in import or export activities need to be extra diligent about understanding the V8 implications.
Exactly. They might need to register for VAT in multiple countries, and they need to be meticulous about keeping track of their transactions and ensuring they're complying with all the relevant regulations.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare. What resources are available to help businesses navigate this complex international VAT landscape?
Well, the good news is that there are organizations and resources specifically dedicated to providing guidance on international VAT. The International VAT Association, for example, is a great source of information and support.
And I imagine professional accountants who specialize in international tax can be invaluable partners in this process.
Absolutely. They can help businesses understand their obligations, develop strategies for compliance, and navigate the often confusing world of international VAT regulations.
So the key takeaway here is that VAT isn't just a domestic issue, it's a global one. And businesses that operate across borders need to be prepared to deal with the complexities that come with it.
Well said.
Oh.
And I think it's a reminder that the world of VAT is constantly evolving. New regulations are being introduced, technologies are changing the way we approach compliance, and businesses are operating in increasingly globalized ways.
It's definitely a dynamic field, and it highlights the importance of staying informed, seeking expert guidance when needed, and being willing to adapt to change.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've explored the nuances of UK VA, the potential impact of recent changes, and the exciting future of VA accounting in a tech-driven world. We'll be back after a short break to wrap up our deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts.
Okay, we're back, ready to wrap up our VAT dive.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground today, from VAT thresholds and flat rate schemes to the impact of technology and the importance of staying informed.
It's been a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
It has. So for our listeners who might still be feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this information, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that VAT doesn't have to be this big, scary monster
Right.
lurking in the shadows. With a little bit of knowledge
Yeah.
and the right guidance, you can navigate the world of VAT successfully.
And there are resources available to help, like the fantastic blog posts from MA and CO accountants that we've been discussing today.
Their insights have been so helpful.
They have. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Ooh, I love a good brain teaser. Hit me with it.
We've talked about how technology is automating many aspects of VAT accounting, but I'm curious about the human element. What skills or qualities do you think will be most important for accountants in the future as technology continues to evolve?
That's a great question. I think we're going to see a shift from purely technical skills to more strategic and analytical thinking.
So less number crunching, more big picture thinking.
Exactly. Accountants will need to be able to interpret data, identify trends, and provide strategic advice to their clients.
It's almost like they'll become part data analyst, part business consultant.
That's a great way to put it. And of course, communication skills will be more important than ever. Accountants will need to be able to explain complex VAT issues
Right.
in a clear and concise way to clients who may not have a deep understanding of the intricacies of tax law.
So it's a blend of technical expertise, strategic thinking, and strong communication skills.
Precisely. Those accountants who can master that trifecta will be in high demand in the future.
That's a great takeaway for anyone in the accounting profession or anyone considering a career in this field.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of UK V8.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we hope you learned a lot about VAT and how to navigate this complex but essential part of the business world. Until next time, stay curious.